How's it going, everyone? We are here for week 7, salary exploitation. I felt like the gears were kind of churning the first few weeks, but I wasn't. I'd make my comparison to Le'Veon Bell. I needed a few weeks to get going, but now that we're here, middle of the season, I'm really turning things on, and I'm having patience behind the pocket. I am Russell Clay, the Le'Veon Bell of this podcast, and here's Jason, our punter. How's it going, Jason?
Good, just on the sidelines, taking a few punts every now and then. I come I'm like, Pat McAfee, like that's my style.
You have your role, and no, obviously I'm joking. Clear, because Jason literally writes the article. I just sit here and comment on it. So it's a great article. Certainly check that out when it's up on the site. But for now, we're going to break it down here. Break down the Week 7 slate, which is certainly an ugly one. We have some differing views on what that means. I kind of like it because I think it's going to mean GPP scores are going to be lower. He doesn't like it because he likes those chalky plays in his mouth. So I guess let's talk about it because there's going to, it's not just us saying this. Empirically, Vegas is going to be lower totals this week for all these games. There's going to be lower fantasy scores all around. Maybe a few of these matchups pop off, but for the most part, it's going to be a high upside, low floor week, correct?
I tend to agree with that. I mean, you're Aaron Rodgers done for the year. Obviously, that Saints-Packers game, that takes a hit in terms of a total. DK, you don't get the Sunday night game, Falcons-Patriots. There's, surely going to be fantasy points there. FanDuel, that you're lucky to have it. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, like you have Dallas on the road against San Francisco. I think it's going to be a good – there's no like full team onslaughts that you're really looking at game stacks. I feel it's going to be very narrow from your teams on where you're going to be going.
Right, and even the Cowboys know Zeke this week, or unless something crazy happens within the next few days.
We don't know all the law jargon. We don't, We
are not lawmen. We are laymen. So we're going to stay away from that conversation as a whole. But, I mean, I guess let's just jump into it because let's just jump into quarterback. It is ugly. I mean, we have Dak at the top. We were talking about some interesting, Cam maybe in GPPs, Mariota. Could it be a Russell Wilson week? But is there any value you're looking at here? Or is this just sort of, make your assertive calls at quarterback this week and maybe pay up?
Yeah, I think that's how it's going to look. Because, I mean, when you come at pricing here, Josh McCown on the road against Miami is not bad. You don't feel 100% comfortable with it. I think, McCown has shown it. Phillip Rivers at Denver or against Denver, I don't really like it. Like, there's a lot of guys I just don't want to go down low. Goff against Arizona, I'm not really intrigued with. Winston may not be healthy. A lot of backup quarterbacks in. So let's talk about the mid-range because, I mean, you mentioned it could be Russell Wilson week. I'm in agreement. I usually don't like playing him in these Eastern Coast games, but Giants defense, sure they got Janoris Jenkins, but that's about it. Other than that, they've been pretty bad this year.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting game because we're watching the Giants transition to post Odell Beckham offense, and we're seeing a lot of Evan Ingram. We're seeing a slower pace, maybe getting that run game going, which isn't going to be good for pace. So that's certainly a worry with Russell Wilson. But there's also the other end that, hey, maybe they caught Denver in a weird spot and they're just going to be terrible again, when they come back home. So I think that's certainly something we have to entertain with Russell Wilson, obviously coming off a bye and the weak offensive line. But I do think there's upside in this matchup.
Yeah, I do too, and that's really what we're looking at. Like, I feel like there's upside with all these guys up top, like Mariota, Prescott, Wilson, Newton. Like, there's upside, just the floors aren't as stable as I want them to be. FanDuel, I mean, there's some nice value quarterbacks on FanDuel, like McCown at 7K, Carson Palmer 7K, people are going to be in the Tyrod this week. I'm okay with it at the moment, but I prefer LaShawn McCoy. But like outside of that, I mean, Flacco, Eli, Cutler, Brett Hundley, I'm just not good matchup. I don't know if I'm going to be buying into him as basically a Bearman guy.
Athletic dude, didn't run much last week though. Maybe that's a Minnesota thing more than a him thing. I don't know. That's going to be a tough sell for me. I'm probably staying away from that. I'd rather just play Tyrod, even potentially without Charles Clay. I will say Monday night on Yahoo, Kirk Cousins is on the slate and $31. So
and Wentz has looked damn good this year.
Yeah, so I think on Yahoo you have a much better option. The retro main slate. It's really, it's not what it used to be. All right, so I think that's enough at quarterback. I mean, it's really gross. I think you could play McCown, right?
Yeah.
You could play him. But again, that voice, that sound you just made is what we're looking at here. Running back, oh boy, lead the way. What do you got here?
I mean, we should kind of recap a little bit of last week in terms of running backs because, Kamara, Ingram, obviously Kamara was fine, but Ingram was clearly the big winner there with Adrian Peterson out of town. And then you look at Ingram, I mean, massive bump. He was down 4,400. He's 6,700 on DraftKings this week. He's now up into that territory. If you look on FanDuel, he's only 7,100. I don't feel like that's still expensive enough. For I think his workload going into the future, like McKinnon, Ingram, Jordan Howard, like all those guys, heavy workload guys right now. 7K, 6,800. That's not bad prices. DraftKings, it's a little bit different story.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of tough. Are you paying up this week? Sort of not quite the cushy matchups we had. So with your lineup construction, are you going to be paying up for Leonard Fournette? Obviously tweaked that ankle. Other than that, has a good matchup. Zeke suspended. Bell against the tough Bengals defense. Gurley against the Cardinals D. That's been up and down. A lot of risky propositions at the top. So what are you looking at there? I know you mentioned McCoy.
Yeah, big McCoy here. I mean, 7,900. I feel like he's kind of just slightly out of that range of like top price guys. 74 on DraftKings. I feel like that's a nice bargain for him. I mean, he's about 1,600 cheaper than Fournette and Bell. So, I definitely Bell is obviously I think a top option this week. We've kind of clearly seen that Bell in these grinded out bad games like Baltimore, Kansas City, where they're just going to run him 30 plus times. Like he's going to be the guy. And it's weird because in the matches where you just expect him to blow right through, he really hasn't. But yeah, obviously okay with Bell this week. I think when we look at everything else, Melvin Gordon's always a sneaky play, I think, against Denver. It's just a matter of if he gets those touchdowns. But his usage in the workload has just made him actually a really good DK play too, or in the passing game. 7K, I mean, for what he's been putting up. I mean, he's not efficient. It has not been efficient, but on the ground, he has not been that efficient this year. But I think overall fantasy-wise, he's been there. Jay Ajayi 62 on DraftKings this week. I don't mind it. I know we went down that road against the Jets a few weeks ago with Miami, and it was just an absolute shit show. I don't think there was any way other to put it. So, I kind of like some of these prices at running back. I think you have a wide variety. Adrian Peterson, I clearly still has it. I know Bucks were banged up defensively and Cards at home, but he looked good.
I mean, YOLO, if you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you. It's one of those where, you see someone lining up for to do something really stupid, but there's a small chance they could do it, actually get it. I'm going to be like, all right, I'm not going to do it, but you could certainly hit that kick flip or jump off that table and body slam that person. But I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm going to maybe have a little exposure, certainly not going all in. 1 week after 2 years, he had that major injury and then didn't show much of the Saints. So could be something, could not be. Remains to be seen for me. I think he's an interesting play, but that's it. A few more guys I'll list off here. Carlos Hyde against Dallas. Buck Allen, 5,300, Joe Mixon. Any of these guys sort of piquing your interest or?
No, not really. I think we should talk about the Dallas situation. Obviously, likely no Zeke this week. Could be, obviously no Zeke for quite some time. Given this is Monday afternoon, like when we're not putting a ton of stock in either McFadden or Morris, I don't think you actually need to really go there this week. I don't even find that the San Francisco front seven is all that bad against the run like the past where, last 2 years we've basically just been, it was, line up whoever was playing San Francisco. And when you look at DK did a really good job of pricing up McFadden and Morris to the point where it's like it's a little easier just not to use them. And FanDuel, McFadden's likeliness or Morris's likeliness of scoring 20-plus FanDuel points or DK points, it's not that high to me, and I think at a position where there's going to be a lot of fantasy points to be had this week, I don't need to dive down there.
Could we get 15 points out of Frank Gore this week?
Sure. You can get 15 points out of Frank Gore any week.
Okay. Just throwing it out there. Any other guys before we move on to wide receiver?
No, I don't think so.
Andre Ellington, 4,300, but it's fairly clear that his role has dried up with Adrian Peterson there.
Yeah. Devontae Freeman, 78 on FanDuel is a nice price because New England's defense is still very bad.
Good call. So. Wide receiver. Oh, boy. All right. If you go on DraftKings and you sort of look at the matchups, not a great way to do your research, but if you just go down the line, there's a lot of red at the top where all the high-priced guys are, and that's usually not a great sign. Dez against San Francisco is nice, but Brown, Green, Evans kind of in tougher matchups this week. So what's sort of your strategy here?
Yeah, this is not a fun week at the pay-up spot. I think they're all in play. It's just going to be one of those ones where I think you can take your shots with either, but it's not like last week where I think you can jump all in on someone. I have some interest in like Michael Thomas. I think this is a sneaky Michael Thomas game against Green Bay secondary. But yeah, outside of that, like you can use Brown. I like AJ Green. I think he's one of my preferred ones that's not named Dez. Just because the targets are going to be there. This is likely going to be a favorable game script for him being down. What's your take on the Green Bay guys? Because their salaries have kind of taken a hit wide receiver wise. Like Cobb and Adams are pretty cheap. Jordy's kind of slipping in price. With Hundley being in there, I think that kind of downgrades them a little bit. But could it make him a contrarian option against Green Bay if no one's going to be on him? I think that's an early take.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I just think other people are going to have that take. I think they're going to be lower owned. I don't think they're going to be low owned. You know what I mean? So instead of Jordy at 20%, it's going to be like 13 or 10%, something like that. I don't mind that. Yeah, I don't mind that against the Saints. I am worried about Marshawn Lattimore though. He looks pretty good.
Yep.
To get into some of the values you mentioned, Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess, what are you looking at for them?
Well, they're more FanDuel guys because they're below the 7K mark, which I kind of draw the line at. DraftKings are a little bit more expensive. Funchess is 6K on DraftKings. Obviously, Funchess coming off a down week, against Philly. These guys are good. I think I view Carolina as kind of a boomer bust team this week. It could be one of those ugly 17-13 games because if Chicago's going to run the ball 30-plus times with Jordan Howard, that doesn't leave a lot of if they can control the pace, it doesn't leave a lot of upside for this Carolina team. But if Carolina can get up to a lead, I think that favors them. Pierre Garçon I actually like this week. 5,800 on DraftKings, not a bad price for him. 67 on FanDuel. He's been clearly the number one option there. Regardless of the quarterback situation, I think he's in play against Dallas. I think Dallas is going to be a little bit more on pace. I think Dak's going to be throwing the ball. So I'm okay with Garçon as kind of that other side of the coin.
And the most important question of the week, which Jets receiver do I play this week, baby? Let's go, Jeremy Curley. You big man. I love you.
God,
season-long winner in the flex. Let's go.
There's 4 viable Jets wide receivers. That's sick. That is
That's
absolutely,
disgusting.
including ASJ in there. We got Curly. We got Robbie Anderson. We got Jermaine Kurt. Like, what world are we living in right now where it's week 7, we're talking the Jets passing game?
Unbelievable. But they do keep getting good matchups. And McCown's been serviceable, and the running game's been serviceable, and they've just been able to move the ball. I don't know how, but it's another good matchup. And I like that you put him here. Curse has looked good. I mean, not great, but for what I thought his skill set was coming from Seattle, he looks like a pretty good receiver. So I have to agree with you. I think they're all in play.
Where do you in terms of like cheaper options, I guess let's talk the Rams real quick. If Patrick Peterson's out, I think that obviously helps things, but I've still just been clearly targeting whoever Justin Bethel's on, like, and whoever basically the guys in the slot are. Like, I think Cooper Kupp is kind of a sneaky play this week. I don't know if like I'd play Robert Woods because you would just imagine that Sammy Watkins will see Patrick Peterson if he goes, but he was out on the last few drives of that Cardinals game, and that's when you saw Mike Evans take advantage of him being out because Mike Evans didn't beat Patrick Peterson. You watch that game, he was completely held and he got nothing, and there was a lucky touchdown.
So what we've seen from this Rams offense is they're going to be able to move the ball in a lot of different ways. So I think, like you mentioned, watch if Peterson plays or not, because if he does, I think it's going to be another rough week for Sammy Watkins. He's just had a brutal streak of cornerback matchups. I mean, Peterson, Ramsey, and I mean the Seahawks secondary before that. So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think you can definitely look at Kupp and Woods. Maybe look at Gurley to get more passing work. But yeah, I think, certainly a way to go there for sure. Any other wide receivers down there that you're kind of taking a serious look at here?
Randall Cobb's 5,800 on FanDuel. Deshaun Jackson is still cheap. Obviously, you expect, once again, the primary focus to be Mike Evans, but Jackson just kind of continues to produce and continues to get targets. I know it's a tough matchup against Buffalo, but I just like what he's been doing. I mean, 3 double-digit fantasy point games in the last 3 of the last 4. Yeah, it's about it. It's a lot of mid-range guys. I mean, John Brown's interesting at 59. I do think Jacksonville wide receivers, I mean, Hearns and Marquise Lee, if Fournette is banged up, I think is somewhat interesting too. And if Fournette, somehow something happens, I mean, Chris Ivory was a clear number 2 guy.
And hey, sharp take alert. Are you ready? Mike Williams got his first catch last week. They're starting to ramp up his snaps. It's not this week, but I think it's really important to watch his snaps because this guy is good. And if we could get him one week, maybe next week at, 3,700 on DK, let's do it. And that's really it. Anything below 4K for you?
Oh, God. There probably has not been a guy below 4K in quite some time. Like, I just look like Marquise Goodwin, if you want to take a flyer, like, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I guess with all the Martavis Bryant commotion, Juju Smith-Schuster has been a guy who's going to probably get a little bit of luck if something happens. No, I just can't see. Like, Zay Jones is the only viable body right now in the Buffalo passing game, but I don't even know if that means anything at this point. He did see 6 targets in their last game against Cincinnati, though.
Tight ends. Our exciting pool of promising tight ends have been priced up, and that
makes the price up guys more playable.
It's left us with some stuff. So is there any of this stuff that you've sorted through and think you like here?
All right. I kind of like Jimmy Graham this week. Obviously coming off a couple of actually decent games, like he's been getting some targets, 8, 6, and 11 over his last 3, 15, 10, 14 DK points. He's only 4,900. I think that's a good price tag for him. DraftKings, FanDuel, it's a little bit different story because you're knocking the full point PPR, so those only 6 targets are only 3 points. But he's 5,800. Like, when you look at things, He's the same price as basically guys like Tyler Kroft. He's only a couple hundred more than Rudolph or Martellus Bennett. I like Graham this week. I like Evan Ingram. It's the mid-range guys that I like. I don't think I'm going to be really diving down. If you want to go down, I think George Kittle has continued to see like this is going to be his role. 8-9 targets over the last 2 weeks. Obviously, the big game a couple of weeks ago. He only got moved up 200. He's 36 on DraftKings. I think that's a fine price for him. If guys are out, I think Austin Hooper is clearly still an option too, but he's more FanDuel at 5K.
Good calls. I like the George Kittle call. I think that's kind of what we're looking at on DK. Are you diving into this Fleener, Watson, Joku, Zach Miller type of tier, or are you just paying up?
Do I hate myself, Russ?
No, I don't think so.
So no, okay. I'm not.
Noted. Defense. Kind of looking better than last week, where there weren't a lot of good defenses on DK. FanDuel, we thought Broncos were a lock. What's the breakdown this week for you for defenses?
It's a pretty interesting week. I mean, I think Carolina's interesting as a pay-up option, but I think when you really look at things, Buffalo's in a good spot. 4,500 at home. I think they've been one of the most surprising defenses this season, not because they don't have talent, just because they're playing such a cleaner style of football. But when you look at their FanDuel, I mean, they have not been below 8 FanDuel points this season, 8, 14, 8, 10, 9. They've allowed over 17 points just once all year. That was last week. They're just getting it done. They're getting after the quarterback. That secondary has been tremendous. They forced 2 interceptions in 4 or 5 games this year. 4,500 is a bargain. That's a good price for them. I mean, Bills on DK 3,400. It's not bad. Over on Yahoo, I mean, they're kind of priced down a little bit too. They're only $15. So I like them this week. I think they're going to come in as one of my favorite options because I feel like I'm going to need that extra. They're $1,000 cheaper than Seattle. $1,000, Russ, on FanDuel.
That's crazy. So one question, if Semien doesn't play, could we look at the Chargers on DK at 24 as sort of that punt play? Or do you think the running game gets going?
No, I think that's a good option. It's, Brock Osweiler's back in town. I mean, you can look there. I think there's definitely shots to be taken. Minnesota at home against Baltimore. Baltimore's offense is trash. Straight trash. Justin Tucker's their best offensive player.
It's not great.
There's not going to be a punt Saints defense that scores 30+ points this week. So, no.
Yeah, I'm with you. Any final thoughts before we head out?
No, like I said, it's a bad week. I think pricing, once again, the value plays continue to dry up from one week to another. They get moved up. DK has done a tremendous job at doing that. FanDuel's a little bit slower to react. So I think guys like Ingram, guys like McKinnon, become still value plays on FanDuel, where DraftKings, it's, I think they're just jump up into that mid range where, you got to talk about them, but you also got to talk about the surrounding guys around them. And that makes it easier to kind of make some pivots.
Absolutely. Well, obviously we will do the slate breakdown later in the week when we get some clarification on some of these injuries. Obviously a few quarterbacks out, so certainly tune into that, but hopefully this gives you a little, what do they use before, a palate cleanser of sorts, a little sorbet before your slate breakdown. So for Russell J. Clay, and Jason Gilball and such. Rough outro, guys. That's fine. We're going to get better. Like Le'Veon. Le'Veon doesn't break 20-yard runs.
Russ, it's week 7.
Le'Veon doesn't break 30-yard runs every play. Sometimes he gets stuffed at the line. But, we're going to keep moving forward. So certainly give us a like and subscribe if you like this video. If you don't, let us know in the comments, and I'll hate you and get a restraining order. But we will see you guys next week.